Defending Israel with David Harris is made possible in part by Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Paul and Lynn Light Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation.
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and welcome back to Defending Israel. This week's guest I can only describe as fearless, indefatigable, and in so many ways prophetic. Her name, known to many of you I'm sure, Melanie Phillips, author, journalist, speaker. Melanie, welcome to Defending Israel.
Thank you very much for having me, David. Very good to see you again.
Likewise. As we meet, the news is that Israel has attacked Hamas leadership living in Qatar itself. Your thoughts on that news?
My first thought was, at last, about time, because it's been a source of great perplexity to me, and I think to many others, that throughout this terrible period since October 7, 2023, Qatar has been regarded as the, in quotes, honest broker in the endless negotiations that have gone on over ceasefire, hostage release, and so on. And Qatar is anything but an honest broker. Qatar represents the Muslim Brotherhood and it represents Hamas, which is why since October 7, it has sheltered the Hamas leadership in Doha. And it's amazed me that the West, America, Britain, European countries, have regarded Qatar as an honest interlocutor in all this. And one reason I think is that Qatar, I'm afraid, has played the same kind of role from the Middle East as China has been playing with the West, which is over many years playing a very shrewd game of buying up large quantities of Western assets, university courses and sports stadia in Britain and all kinds of stuff like that, made itself completely invaluable, and I'm afraid to say has also bought up people. Various Western luminaries in different fields of public life have been bought by Qatar, are receiving Qatari money. And this has kind of insulated Qatar, as far as I can see, from the kind of opprobrium that it should have received. But it has been intolerable to so many of us to see Qatar playing this kind of role because, you know, lives have been lost as a result. I mean, you know, it seemed to me that on October the 8th, if the then Biden administration had said to Qatar, okay, game is up, guys, either the hostages come out tonight, all of them, unharmed, or you're out of here. We're out of you. We're going to take away our base in Qatar. We're going to regard you henceforth as pariahs, unless we get everybody back immediately. I think it would have been over. But of course, America didn't do that. No one did that. And it was a farce. And as a result, you know, you had this dreadful thing of Qatar pretending to be an interlocutor, which was really Hamas negotiating with America. And of course, you know, Hamas only had one demand, which was that Israel totally surrender as the condition for it releasing those hostages. So now, at last, it would appear President Trump's patience ran out. It ran out, as I understand it, yesterday. He said in terms, okay, Hamas, we've given you every chance to agree to the terms of the latest deal that Israel has agreed to. You have refused. And so a day later, Israel hits Hamas in Doha. Now, this to me is very significant indeed, because first of all, it's the end of the illusion of Qatari honest brokership. It hopefully has wiped out all of Hamas's leadership. When I'm speaking to you now, I don't know whether it's wiped them all out or most of them, but let's assume it's wiped out most, if not all. which is obviously a terrific thing to have happened. And it changes the dynamic of the region, because no longer can Qatar be regarded in the way that it has been regarded. Precisely how it's going to change everything in the region, I don't know. Whether it actually will make Hamas now give up, or whether it will make Hamas double down. We all have been literally, we've been so worried, and we are still so worried that anything like this can further imperil the lives of the hostages, whose only purpose in being taken, as far as Hamas was concerned, was to guarantee that Israel would never win this. So there's so much that we at the moment don't know, but it's a great day, it's a great advance, and finally, the veil has been torn off, and those terrible men have met their just desserts.
Do we know yet the initial reaction of 10 Downing Street? I'm speaking to you in London, and if I may ask a provocative question, does it matter what 10 Downing Street says in the wake of this Israeli attack?
Well, it's a question of to whom does it matter? Well, first of all, I don't know what 10 Downing Street is going to say. I would expect, given the record of the Keir Starmer government, I would expect them to be equivocal, verging on hostile, on the basis that, in the civilized world, we don't do extrajudicial executions, something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they said that. On the other hand, they may be more realistic than I'm giving them credit for, and realize how the game has changed, particularly in relation to President Trump, because Britain is extremely concerned to stay on the right side of President Trump. And if they were to come out against an operation which, as I understand it, President Trump green-lit, I think that would be very unwise. And I very much doubt whether Keir Starmer would do that. So I would expect something that was typically British equivocation, which the British do excel at. But basically, the British government under Keir Starmer has been on the wrong side of this from the start. It has been lending its voice to the defamation of Israel, which has, among other things, caused such a terrible spike in anti-Jewish attacks in Britain, and has, more important even than that, given Hamas and Islamists in the world, more generally in the world, every incentive to ratchet up their aggression on the basis that, Britain, and is not alone in this, Britain and Europe, are basically buying into the terrible falsehoods and defamation and lies and libels and blood libels with which they have managed to convince so many people in Britain and the West. Now that has an impact. It has a real-world impact in terms of incentivizing terrorism and violence. So I think what Britain says is actually important. It's nothing compared with the importance of America, obviously. But in terms of Israel's relations with Britain, again, it's a most bizarre thing. You have on the rhetorical level this tremendous hostility to Israel that's been going on behalf of the Starmer government in Britain. It's lent itself to the lies and libels. It hasn't said this is all a lie. It hasn't said it's not true that Israel is committing genocide. What a ridiculous idea. It's morally repugnant to characterize its defense against genocide as genocide. It hasn't said that. It hasn't said there's no such thing as starvation in Gaza, promoted by Israel. Israel has let in 2 million tons, whatever it is, of food. Hasn't said that. On the contrary, British ministers have lent themselves to these lies. And that is, I think, for various reasons. It's Keir Starmer is in hock to, on the one hand, the hard left in his party, which threatens him the whole time, and even relatively moderate members of parliament, Labour members of parliament, are looking over their shoulder very nervously at a Muslim community that has become ever more politically important in terms of its ability to deprive them of their elected seats. And so, it's Gaza first, I'm afraid, for many Labour members of parliament, which is an amazing thing, considering that it is of absolutely zero interest or consequence to the vast majority of British people. But that's the way Britain has gone. And so, it's been on the wrong side. I don't expect it to be on the right side on this occasion either.
To illustrate your point, Melanie, you posted recently that while Britain has threatened to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu should he come to the UK under the ICC warrant, on the other hand, Britain welcomed Mahmoud Abbas, who is paying the slayers of Jews, including the most recent that we witnessed in Israel this week.
Well, indeed.
So
I mean, he hosted Abbas on the very day
exactly
that there was this slaughter at the Ramat Junction yesterday.
So if I may ask, I'm sure you've been asked many times, what happened to Churchillian Britain? Where is it? I mean, I know that's the subject of books and lengthy articles, but for our viewers who surely are asking, but there was a different Britain not so long ago, wasn't there? What happened?
Very, very different. But before I answer that question, there's another curiosity about this, which is that on the rhetorical level, there is this tremendous hostility and on the part of the British government and lending itself to these lies and libels against Israel. But on the other hand, Britain depends upon Israel for military hardware and for intelligence. And it really does depend on Israel for these things. The traffic is that way. So Britain, not that long ago, the British government put an embargo on certain aspects of military hardware to Israel. It's a kind of mini boycott. I mean, who do they think they're kidding? They need and want to buy much more military hardware from Israel than the other way around. So what's happened to Churchillian Britain? It's not the same as it was even 5-10 years ago. And it's a long story, but basically Britain has lost its mojo through decades, among other things. I think the most important thing is decades of de-education. People no longer can think for themselves. Education has been kind of eviscerated of meaning. I mean, the very idea of the education system as a transmission of a culture, which is what education is, I'm old enough to remember when that was disposed of in the 80s on the basis that the Western nation, and Britain in particular, were basically born in the original sins of colonialism and imperialism and racism and whiteness and all those things that you know in America, different context, different particular history, but basically the same thing. And consequently, you couldn't transmit the culture through education, and you had to create a completely new world based on universal human rights. Well, there are no universal human rights, actually. They are very particular to Western civilization, the kind of things that we take for granted as human rights. And so if you attack Western civilization and its basic codes of morality and basic principles, then you're going to attack the foundational creed of real human rights. And that's what's happened. And I've written endlessly about this. But so that's one thing that happened. The second thing that happened, which was related to that, which was at some point in the 70s, maybe, perhaps earlier, but certainly by the 80s, it was a thing that in the universities, the idea of absolute or objective truth just went out the window. Everybody believed, everybody who was educated believed that the only people who thought there was such a thing as absolute or objective truth were either people with no education and no sophistication, or else they were religious nutcases. And if there's no such thing as objective truth, there's no such thing as a lie. And consequently, you believe the lies because everything became a matter of opinion. So if I would go to people and say, you say these terrible things about Israel, but actually the facts are these. Look at these millions of tons of food that are coming in. They would say, no. These are not facts. This is just your opinion. And you are a Jew and you are therefore partisan. And I don't like your partisanship, so I will ignore your opinion. I prefer my opinion. It was that. Now, these things and other things have coalesced and produced a situation in which in America, there are certain similarities in America in which Britain and Western society kind of lost the plot. They lost faith in themselves. They lost the idea of what their identity was. They no longer believed that there was anything good about that identity. I'm talking about the elites. I'm not talking about ordinary people. And consequently, they kind of hollowed out the culture. And into that culture marched predatory Islam. The Islamists, the people who want to conquer the rest of the world, who want to conquer the non-Islamic or not Islamic enough world for the most restrictive form of Islam, saw that opportunity because they understand that a society that has destroyed its identity by removing the religious part of that identity, by saying, God is dead and we now have man-made universal rights instead, a society which does away with the religious basis of itself, which is the moral scaffolding. A religion gives a moral scaffolding. Even if you don't believe in God, even if you're not a religious person, that's irrelevant. Religion forms the moral scaffolding. It was the biblical codes that gave the West its idea that, for example, every human being deserved respect because every human being was made in the image of God. It gave the West the idea of compassion and doing the right thing by other people, all kinds of stuff like that. If you get rid of religion, the Islamists understood, the society will not have any way of understanding what it is, will not like itself, and therefore will not be prepared to defend itself. It will never be prepared to die for its principles because it no longer has any. And so it marched, and it's taken various forms in different countries. And so all those things have come together to basically produce a situation in which people can no longer think for themselves. They are very frightened of bucking the consensus, which is a kind of elite narrative to do with universal human rights, universalism, universal values, to which Israel is the absolute impediment and reproach. And all kinds of things follow from that in terms of supporting the brown and black-skinned world against the white-skinned world, the perception that Israel is white-skinned, even though most Israelis are brown or black-skinned, but Israel is white-skinned because Israel has power. What does that mean? It means that Israel has military might. Any country that has military might is white, even if it's brown. I mean, it's like, that is how ridiculous it is. And this all flows together with, intersectionality, and, the world is divided into the powerful and the powerless. The Jews are the powerful. Why? Because they run the world. They run the banks. They run finance. They run the media. They run the law. They are running the American government. Administration after administration are just puppets in the hands of the Jews. This is a common belief among the most fashionable, the most left-wing, the most progressive people in our society, as well as people on what's called the far right. And so you have this tremendous cultural confusion, which is why we are where we are.
And I've heard you use the term, in addition to cultural confusion, cultural coercion, which I think fits very much into what you were discussing. But the obvious question, at the end of the day, the so-called value system of the Reds, the far left, versus the Greens, the Islamists, are as far apart and as threatening to one another.
I know.
And yet you continue to have this marriage of convenience between two forces that at the end of the day will not be able to coexist. How to explain that, Melanie?
Correct. It's bizarre, isn't it? You have people marching literally shoulder to shoulder on the streets of London and other cities, left-wingers committed to, the rainbow of causes. You have queers for Palestine. It's so extraordinary because, in Gaza, gay people are, thrown off the tops of tall buildings. Islamic scholars say in terms openly over and over again, no homosexual will be allowed to live in Palestine. And so you have them marching shoulder to shoulder, women, gay people, people committed to human rights, marching shoulder to shoulder with people who would literally take the head off their shoulders, literally, given the chance. How to explain this? Very simple. They are bound together in the common cause of wanting to destroy the West. The fact that they have a completely different idea of the society they want to replace the West is for these purposes not relevant, because it's all instrumental. They're using each other to destroy the West. And they are also bound, the left, liberal left, and the Islamists are bound together by the common hatred of Israel and of Jews.
So that brings us back to the Jewish community. In light of everything you've said, Melanie, what's the future for this extraordinarily prominent, vibrant Jewish community in Britain that you were a part of, in some respects remain a part of, though you've moved to Israel, and I hope we get at least a moment or two to understand your decision to move to Israel. The community that I was part of during the years I lived in Britain, though I suspect you can't tell from my accent that I ever set foot in Britain. Is there a future for the Jewish community of Britain as we speak?
There will be a future for the Jewish community of Britain and the diaspora if and only if the West decides to save itself from going off the edge of the cultural cliff. And that's a moot point. It might do, it might not do. The West is at a kind of tipping point. It's particularly acute in Britain and Europe, where we can see, the gathering forces of predatory Islam moving into a society which has lost the plot, as I've been saying. And it's not clear to me at all whether Britain and Europe are just going to say, look, it's too much, it's too difficult, it's too dangerous, we can't do it, we haven't got the strength, and we don't even believe in ourselves. Maybe, that may well be, in which case the future is Islamic. And that's not good for the Jews, to put it mildly. Or it may be that the West fights. And the fight may well be a real fight. It may well be a fight, a physical fight.
In the streets.
Yeah, it may be. But if it's a fight, whatever form it takes, if it's a fight, we know from bitter experience the Jews get it in the neck from all sides when there's a fight between competing or clashing cultures. The Jews, they are the enemy of everybody. It's not a happy situation at all. So, I think many Jews in Britain think it's all going to calm down. We've all been here before. We've seen this uprising of hatred. Whenever Israel goes to war in Gaza, it's always the same. And then it's terrible, and then it calms down again. And so we go on. And it's perfectly possible to live as it is, as it is in Israel. It's perfectly possible to live a normal life, even under, hails of missiles in Israel. You live a pretty normal life. People come out of the shelters and they go and sit in a cafe and have a coffee. And it's perfectly possible to live a completely, unthreatened life in London or in other parts of Britain. But you have to really have your head in a bubble to be sanguine about this. And there are many, many Jews in Britain who are very frightened indeed and very uneasy. Because they don't know what to do. And I think it's not so dissimilar in America. I think you are further back down this line.
We're a few steps behind, but we're watching you closely.
You're several steps behind.
We're watching you closely.
You're several steps behind, and the difference is that you have a president, whether you like him or not, it's not the issue. You have a president who is drawing an absolute line in the sand here, and he's saying, I am going to bring America back to what it was. Now, this is an experiment in the making. We have no idea how this is going to end up. And we have no idea, after President Trump leaves office, whether it's all going to snap back. It's going to be, the Democratic Party again. It's going to be, a trajectory which is going to then follow Britain and Europe. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But as far as Jews of the diaspora are concerned, even in America, I'm hearing, Jewish people saying, we know the game is up. It's just going to take longer than it is for you in Britain or in Europe. Will that be the case? I don't know. I mean, in Israel, as you say, I spend most of my time now in Israel. And in Israel, I can tell you, first of all, they're very preoccupied by the basic necessity of continuing to live under threat of annihilation, which does concentrate the mind rather, and it means that they are not actually that concerned with the diaspora. They're looking in horror at the diaspora. They're looking in horror at the rampant anti-Semitism. But I have to tell you, and Americans may not like to hear this, and I can tell you, British Jews don't like to hear this. American Jews may not like to hear this, but the attitude in Israel is, what are they doing there? They should be here. And this is where it's...
We literally have 2 minutes left, and I have to slip in that one question which you've talked around, and that is, until the year 2000, Melanie Phillips had never even visited Israel.
Yes.
Young though you were an adult by then. Now you're largely living in Israel. Briefly, why?
I didn't go to Israel for various reasons. I was brought up by parents who never flew. And Israel was great for other Jews, not for us. We lived in the Golden Medina. Year 2000, I decided that it was no longer possible to live in Britain on my knees. I was being asked, as all Jews are being asked, to make a choice. If you were to support Israel, you were no longer to be considered British. I couldn't live like that. Other people didn't come up against this. They didn't see it. They didn't believe it. It didn't matter to them so much. It mattered to me. I couldn't bear it. And so I moved my center of gravity to Israel. I now spend most of my time in Jerusalem, where I live. My family home is in Jerusalem. But I come to London with insane frequency. I'm in London now. I come to London every few weeks because I have two countries in my head: Britain, which made me, and Israel, which I love. And where I feel complete as a Jew, and where I feel safe. I feel safer under hails of missiles in Israel than I do here in London. So I live a very strange life between two worlds.
And quite a powerful statement and obviously decision. And finally, Melanie, for those who are not yet reading you religiously, following you, tell us about your latest books, tell us about your latest columns, and how people can subscribe or buy.
Fine. My latest book, which was published in America in January, is called The Builder's Stone: How Jews and Christians Built the West and Why Only They Can Save It. And it's an analysis of what's happened to Western civilization through the prism of what happened on October 7, 2023. And it has my suggestions for how to rescue the West from going off the edge of that cultural cliff. Everybody can find what I'm writing, my journalism, my broadcast work, on my website, which is melaniephillips.substack.com. And I can also be found on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MelanieLatest. I think that's about it, but you can, between all those three, you can find what I'm doing.
Melanie, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us on Defending Israel, and may you continue to speak strongly, loudly, and persuasively. JBS viewers, you've just been treated to a half-hour discussion with the one and only, the indomitable Melanie Phillips. Please purchase her books, subscribe to her Substack columns, listen carefully to what she says. She is a prophet in our time. This is David Harris defending Israel, and looking forward to seeing you all again next week. Bye-bye.